My parents stole my $30,000 college fund to save my brother from prison. I left with 2 bags. 10 years later, they begged for more, so I agreed to meet them and handed them a folder containing a legally binding contract. A trap they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The smell of cardboard and packing tape was supposed to be the scent of my future. At 19, I was sitting on the floor of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by 3 meticulously labeled boxes and 2 suitcases. One box was dorm essentials, filled with cheap bedding and a shower caddy. Another was textbooks, the result of a summer spent hoarding every dollar from my waitressing job. The last, smaller box just said, "Home," and it held the only 2 framed photos I owned. I was buzzing with a nervous energy that felt like a low-grade fever, a mix of excitement for my freshman orientation in 2 days and the mild flu I'd been fighting all week. My throat was raw, my head pounded, and I felt weak, but I didn't care. I was leaving. I was finally starting my life, on my terms, with the $30,000 inheritance my grandmother had left me specifically for this purpose. That's when my mother, Helen, appeared in the doorway. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She had been a bank teller for 30 years before retiring, and she still carried the air of someone who was perpetually counting things, forever judging the numbers. "Caroline," she said, her voice was thin, strained. I know, I said, sniffling and taping the last box shut. "I'll be out of your hair by morning. I just need to swing by the bank tomorrow to transfer the tuition payment." My father, Frank, materialized behind her. A large, quiet man who had spent his life as an insurance adjuster, assessing other people's risks while ignoring the massive one living under his own roof. "About the bank, honey," my father started, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's gone," my mother blurted out. I stopped, the roll of tape falling from my hand and bouncing on the carpet. The room, which had just felt full of promise, suddenly seemed to shrink. What's gone?" "The money, Caroline, your college fund," my mother said. Her eyes were hard, not apologetic. "We had to take it." The flu symptoms, the headache, the sore throat, they all vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp dread that pierced my chest. "What do you mean you took it? That's my inheritance. It's in a trust account. You can't just take it." "We're your parents," Frank said, his voice adopting a false heartiness that he used when he was denying a claim. "We are the trustees. We had an emergency." I stood up, my legs shaking. An emergency? What emergency costs $30,000? My mother's face twisted, and the hardness was replaced by a familiar, defensive fury. It was the look she always got right before she defended my older brother, Connor. "Your brother was in trouble. Real trouble. Not which color sheets to buy for a dorm trouble." "Connor," I whispered, "what did he do this time?" It was never small with Connor. At 23, my brother was a freelance graphic designer who had never held a job for more than 6 months. He was the golden child, the brilliant, creative spark who, in our parents' eyes, was just one big break away from success. In my eyes, he was a black hole. "He made a mistake," my father said, shuffling his feet. "He was arrested, Caroline," my mother snapped, tired of the pretense. "A hit and run. He was in a panic. He hit a parked car and drove away, and there were complications. He needed a lawyer, a good lawyer. He needed to pay restitution before the hearing. We couldn't let him go to prison. His life would be over." I stared at them, the silence in the room so loud it hurt my ears. The boxes around me suddenly looked pathetic, like a child's failed attempt to run away from home. "You stole my future," I said, the words barely audible. "You stole my life to save his." "Don't be dramatic," my mother spat. "He's your brother. We're a family. We couldn't let him be ruined over one stupid mistake. You're smart, you'll figure something out. You can always go to school later." "You'll figure something out." The words hit me harder than a slap. All my life, my discipline had been used as a weapon against me, while Connor's lack of it had been his shield. I had worked 40 hours a week all summer. I had maintained a 4 GPA. I had sacrificed every party, every football game, every normal teenage experience, all while they funneled their time and money into Connor's ventures. My grandmother's money was my one escape, my one guarantee, and they had given it to him. I looked at their faces, my mother's defiant anger, my father's weak-willed shame, and I felt nothing. The flu, the fever, the love, the sense of family, it all died in that instant. "Okay," I said, my voice shockingly calm. My mother's expression softened, mistaking my numbness for acceptance. "Good, we knew you'd understand, honey. Family comes first." I turned my back on them and walked to my closet. I pulled out my smallest backpack and a duffel bag. I left the boxes. I left the textbooks I had paid for. I left the framed photos. I packed 2 pairs of jeans, a few shirts, my toothbrush, and my laptop. I zipped the bags. "What are you doing?" Frank asked, his voice laced with confusion. I walked past them, out of the room and down the hall. I didn't run, I walked. I could hear them following me. "Caroline, stop this. Don't be a child," Helen said. I put my hand on the front doorknob. "Caroline, where are you going to go?" my father pleaded. "You're sick, you have nothing." I turned to look at them one last time, framed in the hallway of the house that was never really my home. "You're right, I have nothing. You made sure of that." I opened the door and walked out into the cool night air. I left with 2 bags and the clothes on my back. I didn't look back. The betrayal was worse than any sickness, and the emptiness was a cure. The first 6 months were a blur of desperation and exhaustion. I ended up at a bus station, and with the $200 I had in my wallet from my last waitress paycheck, I bought a one-way ticket to a city 3 states away. It wasn't a choice, just a destination I could afford. I spent the first 2 weeks in a women's shelter. The flu-eyed had ripened into a nasty bout of pneumonia, and I spent my 19th birthday in a cot, shivering, listening to the coughing of the women around me. But even in that haze of fever, a cold, hard resolve settled into my bones. I would not be broken. I would not go back. I would survive. Once I was on my feet, I found a job waiting tables at a 24-hour diner, taking the graveyard shift. I found a tiny, windowless room to rent in the basement of a shared house. The work was brutal, the hours worse. I was constantly tired, constantly counting pennies, but I was free. Every dollar I earned was mine. I enrolled in a single-night class at the local community college. It was all I could afford. A Fundamentals of Programming course. It was practical, and more importantly, it was the opposite of anything my creative brother would ever do. I discovered I had a knack for it. The logic, the structure, the way every problem had a solution if you were just meticulous enough, it was the antidote to the chaos of my family. My life became a simple, repeating algorithm. Work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., sleep from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m., study in class from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. Repeat. I did this for 2 years. I made no friends. I didn't date. I was a ghost, fueled by caffeine and a single, burning purpose: to build a life so stable that no one could ever kick the legs out from under me again. There were no phone calls. I had changed my number. I had no social media. As far as my family was concerned, I had simply vanished. I imagined, in their narrative, that I was the new problem, the ungrateful daughter who had abandoned them. It was cleaner for them that way. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten my grandmother. My grandmother, my mother's mother, had been a sharp, sensible woman. She had seen her daughter's weakness for her son. She had seen my quiet diligence. The $30,000 was from an inheritance, yes, but it wasn't just cash. It had been in a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, UTMA, account. My parents, Helen and Frank, were the custodians. They had the legal right to manage the money for my benefit. But they did not have the legal right to withdraw it for their own use, or for the use of my brother. What they had done wasn't just a betrayal, it was a crime. In that first lonely, agonizing year, I had spent one precious Saturday at the public library, using their free legal resources. I learned the terms: breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent conversion. I learned that the statute of limitations for this in my home state was long. I printed every page. I kept it all in a 3-ring binder, hidden under the loose floorboard in my tiny room. It was my secret, my insurance. I wasn't strong enough to fight them then. I had no money, no power, no voice. I was just a 19-year-old girl trying to survive, but I knew that one day I wouldn't be. I kept my head down. I transferred from community college to a state university, still working full-time, taking classes at night. I clawed my way into an unpaid internship at a small tech firm, which turned into a paid internship, which turned into a junior developer position upon my graduation. 10 years of grinding, relentless work, 10 years of silence. By the time I was 29, I was Caroline, senior software engineer at a major CH corporation in a gleaming city. I had a beautiful, minimalist apartment on the 30th floor. I had a 401k, a robust stock portfolio, and an emergency fund that could keep me afloat for 3 years. I was secure. I was successful. And I was still, in a small, dark place, that 19-year-old girl with a binder full of legal documents under her floorboard. I had never used them. The silence from my family had been total. I had built my fortress so high that I almost convinced myself I was safe. That is, until the phone call. It came on a Tuesday afternoon to my office landline. A number I didn't recognize from my old area code. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, an email landed in my corporate inbox. The subject line was just one word: emergency. It was from my mother. My hands went cold. I clicked it open. It was short, frantic, and riddled with typos. Caroline, I know you hate us. I know we did wrong. But please, I'm begging you, your brother is in trouble, real trouble this time. He's going to be hurt. Please, you're the only one who can help us. I'm so sorry. Please call me. Love, Mom. I stared at the love, Mom. It looked like a typo, an error in the code. I closed the email, my heart hammering against my ribs. I turned my chair to face the floor-to-ceiling window of my office. The city stretched out below me, a map of my success. I had built this entire life to be free of them, and with one email, they were trying to pull me right back into the wreckage. But they weren't dealing with the sick, scared 19-year-old girl anymore. They were dealing with me, and they had forgotten one crucial thing: I keep meticulous records. To understand my mother, Helen, you have to understand my brother, Connor. To her, he wasn't a 33-year-old man with a history of catastrophic failures. He was a brilliant, misunderstood artist, a sensitive soul constantly thwarted by a cruel and mundane world. I was the opposite. I was practical, responsible, sensible. In her eyes, I was the mule, and he was the thoroughbred. You don't ask a thoroughbred to pull a plow, and you don't ask a mule to win the derby. My entire childhood was a testament to this dynamic. When Connor borrowed $500 from our mother's purse at 16 for a can't-miss concert and got caught, he was just being a teenager. When I, at 15, lost my $50 waitressing earnings, I was irresponsible and was grounded for a month. When I spent my weekends winning debate trophies, it was a nice little hobby. When Connor spent a weekend spray painting a mural on the side of a hardware store and getting arrested for it, he was expressing his political voice. My father, Frank, was a willing accomplice. His professional life was about calculating risk, but at home, he abdicated all responsibility. He let Helen manage the family's emotional and financial portfolio, and she poured everything into her worst asset, Connor. My brother was their joint project, their shared delusion. He was charming, I'll give him that. He had that easy smile and a way of talking about his projects that made them sound revolutionary. He was always on the verge of launching an app, starting a design collective, or striking a massive freelance deal. But the deals always fell through. The partners were always scammers. The clients were always Philistines who didn't understand his vision. The $30,000 I lost hadn't been the first bailout, just the largest. And it hadn't been the last. After I left, my silence had apparently been convenient. It allowed them to paint me as the villain, the cold-hearted daughter who had abandoned them in their time of need. It was a much more comfortable narrative than the truth. But now, they needed me. I let the email sit for a full 24 hours. I let my mother's panic stew. I went to my spin class. I led a 2-hour project meeting. I cooked a healthy dinner. I was methodical. I was processing. The 19-year-old girl inside me was screaming, "It's a trap. Don't answer." The 29-year-old woman, however, was already running threat assessments. The next afternoon, I called her from a blocked number. She picked up on the first ring. "Hello, hello. This is Caroline." A choked sob. "Oh, Caroline, oh my baby, you called. I knew you would. I knew you still had a good heart." "I'm not calling to help, Helen," I said. My voice was flat. Using her first name felt like sliding a bolt-action rifle into place. "I'm calling to get the details of the situation." There was a sharp intake of breath. Don't be like that. We're your family." "You stopped being my family 10 years ago. You have 60 seconds to tell me what's wrong before I hang up." The story tumbled out in a frantic, disjointed rush. Connor, it seemed, had finally found his big break. He had partnered with some investors to launch a high-end, bespoke graphic design firm. The investors had given him $50,000 in seed money. Connor, in his infinite wisdom, had used that money not for equipment or a studio, but to... Well, my mother was vague on that. "Living expenses and client acquisition," she'd mumbled. The investors, of course, were not venture capitalists. They were, from what I could gather, loan sharks. The business was a sham, the money was gone, and now they wanted their $50,000 back, plus an obscene amount of interest. They had given Connor 1 week. "They came to the house, Caroline," she wailed. "They're awful men. They threatened your father. They said they know where Connor lives. They're going to hurt him, Caroline. You have to help. I know you have money. We see your name online, your job. You're so successful. We're so proud of you." Proud, the word was a flimsy, pathetic tool. "You're retired," I said. "You have pensions, you have a house. Why haven't you paid them?" This was the part she had been dreading. We don't have it." "You were a bank teller for 30 years. Dad was in insurance. Don't tell me you don't have $50,000. "We had to remortgage the house. A few years ago," she whispered. "Connor, he had another project. It was a sure thing." The black hole had finally swallowed them whole. They had sacrificed my future for him, and then, given the chance, they had sacrificed their own. And now, having exhausted all their own resources, they were coming back to the well they had already poisoned. "We need $50,000, Caroline," she said, her voice turning desperate and ugly. "It's just money to you. It's your brother's life. After all we did for you." "After what you did for me?" I interrupted, my own voice rising for the first time. "What exactly did you do for me, Helen? Besides teach me that family is just a word people use when they want to steal from you." "That's not fair. We gave you a home, we fed you, and we are begging you now, don't you have any decency? If you let him get hurt, his blood will be on your hands." The threat hung in the air, putrid and familiar. This was their game. They created the crisis, and then they demanded I suffer the consequences. I took a deep, steadying breath. The old Caroline would have hung up or cried or screamed. The new Caroline just clicked a mouse. While she was talking, I had been typing. I pulled up my old home state's public records database. I typed in my parents' address. There it was. A second mortgage taken out 3 years ago. A lien filed 6 months ago from a credit card company. They weren't just broke, they were drowning. "I will be in town on Saturday," I said. The sobs on the other end stopped instantly. "You will? Oh, Caroline, thank you. God, thank you. I knew you would. I'll get your room ready." "I will not be staying with you. I will meet you, Frank and Connor at 10:00 a.m. at the diner on Main Street, the one I used to work at." "The diner, but..." "Those are my terms," I said. "All 3 of you, 10:00 a.m. If you are not all there, I will turn around, get back on my plane, and you will never hear from me again. Am I clear?" Yes, she whispered, the hope and relief palpable in her voice. Yes, we'll be there. Thank you, Caroline, you're saving us. I'm not saving you, Helen, I said and hung up. I closed my laptop. The plan was already forming in my mind. It was a simple, logical sequence. They had forgotten who I was, they had forgotten my grandmother, and they had forgotten that I am, above all else, meticulously organized. I had the binder. I had the power. And I was about to introduce them to the concept of consequences. The next 3 days were a masterclass in controlled fury. I booked my flight and a room at the nicest hotel in my old hometown. I put in a request for 2 personal days, citing a family emergency, which felt like a bitter joke. But I wasn't just packing clothes. I was preparing a different kind of luggage. I spent an evening in my home office. The dusty, 3-ring binder from my basement room had long since been digitized and stored in a multi-encrypted drive. I opened the files, the scanned copies of my grandmother's will, the UTMA account statements, the legal precedents I had printed in that library 10 years ago. It was all there, crisp and clear. But that was just the leverage. I needed the full picture. As a software engineer, my job is to find patterns in chaos. My family's financial life was the very definition of chaos. While they saw Connor as an artist, I saw him as a string of bad data, a recurring bug in their system. I did what I do best. I ran diagnostics. I paid for a comprehensive background check on Connor last name. The results were predictable, a string of small claims court judgments, 2 failed LLCs, a list of addresses, each one a step down from the last. Then I dug into the investors. My mother had been hysterical, but she'd let slip the name of Connor's company. A quick search of the state's business registry showed it was registered to a holding company. I followed the digital breadcrumbs. It took me less than an hour to connect that company to a man with a well-documented history of predatory lending. These weren't mafia enforcers. They were bottom feeders who scared retired bank tellers and washed-up insurance adjusters. They were dangerous, yes, but they were also businessmen. They didn't want blood, they wanted money. Finally, I called my lawyer. I had a high-powered attorney on retainer, a necessity in the tech world. Sarah, I said, I have a personal project. I need a document drafted. A promissory note, but I need it to be ironclad. And I need it in the next 48 hours. What are the terms? She asked, all business. The principal is $30,000. The interest, I said, looking at the spreadsheet I'd prepared, is to be compounded annually at the prime rate for the last 10 years. There was a pause on the line. That's a very specific calculation. Caroline, what's the total? $56,842.12. I had calculated it down to the penny. It was, poetically, more than the $50,000 they were begging for. And who are the parties? The debtors are Frank and Helen last name. The creditor is me. Sarah, to her credit, didn't ask any personal questions. I see, and what is the collateral? Their primary residence, I said. I've already pulled the public records. TH. Heirs a second mortgage, but there's still equity. My note will function as a third-position lien. Understood, she said. I'll have a draft for you by morning. I wasn't just building a case, I was building a trap. For 10 years, they had operated under the assumption that I was a child, a resource, an emotional punching bag. They had no idea I was a creditor. They had no idea that I had been keeping a ledger. The night before the flight, I sat in my silent apartment, the city lights twinkling below. The old, familiar flu-like weakness was back. The dread, the anxiety, the suffocating weight of their dysfunction. I felt the pull, the toxic gravity of family. A part of me, the small, 19-year-old part, just wanted to transfer the $50,000 and make them go away forever. It would be easy. I could afford it. But that would be their victory. It would validate their entire worldview, that Connor's needs were paramount and my resources were communal. It would mean they had won. It would mean they had successfully stolen from me twice. I thought about that girl in the shelter, coughing in a cot. I thought about the graveyard shifts, the exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. I thought about the solitude. I had paid for my success with my youth. They had paid for nothing. No, I would not pay again. I printed Sarah's documents. The language was cold, brutal, and legally perfect. I put them in a sleek, black portfolio. I packed my 2 bags, 1 duffel, 1 backpack, just like the first time. But this time, one of them was filled with armor. When I landed, the air of my hometown felt thick and stagnant. I checked into my hotel, ignoring the 14 frantic texts from my mother. Are you here? Where are you staying? Please answer. The next morning, I woke up, did a 30-minute HIIT workout in my room, showered, and put on my armor, a sharply tailored black pantsuit and a silk shell. I looked less like a daughter and more like a liquidator. I drove my rental car to the diner. It hadn't changed. The same cracked vinyl on the booths, the same smell of stale coffee and grease. I walked in, they were already there, crammed into a booth in the back corner. They looked old. My mother's hair was thinner, my father's face puffier. They both looked wrecked by stress. And then I saw my brother. Connor was 33, but he looked like a dissipated teenager. He had a weak, trendy beard and dark circles under his eyes. He was vibrating with a nervous energy, his knee bouncing under the table. He couldn't even look at me. I slid into the booth opposite them. A waitress came over. Coffee. Just water, thank you, I said. My mother started to cry immediately. Oh, Caroline, you came, you look wonderful. Thank you, Helen, I said. So, Frank blustered, trying to take charge. Your mother explained the situation. It's a terrible misunderstanding, really. Connor just got in with the wrong people. No, I said, my voice cutting through his. Connor got in with the wrong people, again, and you financed it, again, and now you expect me to fix it, again. Connor finally looked up, his eyes flashing with the old, familiar arrogance. I don't need a lecture from you, Caroline. Are you going to help us or not, if you're just here to feel superior? Connor, shut up, Helen hissed, smacking his arm. It's all right, Helen, I said calmly. I reached into my bag and pulled out the black portfolio. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here for a business transaction. I slid the portfolio across the table. My mother's hands visibly trembled as she reached for it, thinking it was a check. My father looked relieved. Connor just looked impatient. Helen opened it. I watched her face as she read the first page. The title was in bold, clear letters, Loan and Repayment Agreement. Her face went from confusion to disbelief, to a pale, splotchy white. What is this? She whispered. That, I said, is your bill. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat. $56,000? Caroline, this is a mistake. We're asking you for $50,000, not this. It's not a mistake, Helen, I said, my voice calm and even as if I were explaining a code regression to an intern. It's an invoice. $30,000 stolen from my UTMA account 10 years ago, compounded at the prime rate. I've been very generous. I waived the penalties for fraudulent conversion. Frank snatched the papers from her. His eyes, trained to read the fine print of insurance policies, scanned the pages. He saw the legal language. He saw the signature line for a notary. He saw the clause pledging his house as collateral. This is a joke, he said, but his voice wavered. You can't do this. You did, I said. 10 years ago, you breached your fiduciary duty as custodians of my account. You stole my inheritance. What I am doing is offering you a way to formalize your debt to me outside of a courtroom. It's an extremely generous offer, all things considered. This was the first time my brother, Connor, seemed to understand what was happening. His eyes, which had been darting around the diner, focused on me with pure venom. You snake, he spat, his voice rising. You do this to your own family. We're about to lose everything. I could be killed. And you're coming at us for money. After all this time, you're unbelievable. You're right, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I am unbelievable. I am the daughter you threw away so you could protect him. And you I said, turning back to my parents, are the parents who chose to sacrifice your child for this. A 33-year-old man who has never paid a bill, never held a real job, and who has now gambled away your house. That's not true, Helen shrieked, drawing stares from the other patrons. His business was legitimate, it was just a bad partner. Was it, Helen? I asked. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a second, thinner folder. I slid it across the table. This one isn't for you to sign, it's just for you to read. Inside were the documents I'd pulled. The business registry for Connor's company, showing it was a shell. The background check on his investor, highlighting his convictions for fraud. And the piece de resistance, the public records of my parents' second mortgage and the credit card liens. My father's face went from pale to ashen. He was an insurance man, he understood liens. He understood in that moment that I had done a full risk assessment on them. You've been spying on us, Frank whispered. He looked violated. I've been protecting my interests, I corrected him. Something you taught me I had to do. You don't have $50,000 to give Connor. You don't have $5,000. You're broke. You bet everything on him and you lost. And now you've come to me your backup plan to do it again. He is my son, Helen cried, tears of rage and self-pity streaming down her face. What was I supposed to do? Let him go to prison? Let him be hurt? You have so much. A fancy job, a big apartment, it's just money to you. Why are you doing this to us? Why? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. Because you made me sleep in a shelter. Because I got pneumonia on my 19th birthday in a room full of strangers. Because I worked 80-hour weeks for 10 years, living on stale coffee and instant noodles, to build a life you tried to take from me before it even started. You're not asking me for $50,000. You're asking me for the last piece of my soul, the part that's supposed to just roll over and forget. And the answer is no. Connor suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the linoleum. I've heard enough of this. She's not going to help, she's just here to gloat. He jabbed a finger at me. You were always like this. A cold, heartless little bookworm. You always thought you were better than us. Well, enjoy your money, Caroline. I hope it keeps you warm at night. He stormed out of the diner, slamming the door so hard the bell above it jangled violently. My mother watched him go, her face a mask of tragedy. She turned back to me, her eyes empty. He's going to be killed, and it will be your fault. No, Helen, I said, standing up and placing a $20 bill on the table for my water. It will be your fault. You had a choice 10 years ago. You chose him. Every bad decision he has made since is a direct result of that choice. You taught him that actions don't have consequences. I am just the first consequence he's ever actually had to face. I left the portfolio with the loan agreement on the table. You have 24 hours to sign that and have it overnighted to my lawyer, I said. If you don't, she is instructed to file a civil suit against you both for the full amount, plus damages, on Monday morning. I'm sure your creditors will be very interested to learn about that. Goodbye, Frank. Goodbye, Helen. I walked out of the diner, my hands shaking but my head held high. The first confrontation was over. The spell wasn't broken, not yet, but it was cracked. My mother and father were left sitting in the booth, staring at the two folders, one detailing their ruin, the other offering their only terrible way out. I didn't go back to my hotel. I went to a coffee shop, opened my laptop, and monitored my communications. The desperation from my family would escalate, and I needed to be ready for it. The first call came an hour later from my father. His bluster was gone, replaced by a hollow, pleading tone. Caroline, please, let's just talk about this. This legal document, it's not necessary, we're family, we can work this out. There is nothing to work out, Frank, I said. You owe me the money. The document is how you pay me back over time. It's more than you ever offered me. But your mother, she's a wreck, and Connor, he's gone, he's not answering his phone. What if those men find him? Caroline, please, this is just money. We're talking about your brother's life. I am talking about my life, I countered, my voice firm. The one you stole, you have my terms, the clock is ticking. I hung up. The next wave came from Helen. It was a barrage of text messages, each more hysterical than the last. He's going to die. This is your fault. How can you be so cruel? I am your mother. I will never forgive you for this. You have destroyed this family. I read each one, and with each message, the old guilt that had lived in my stomach for a decade began to shrink, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. She wasn't an enabler. She was an active participant. She was just as much of an antagonist as Connor. She was angry, not because I was wrong, but because I was right, and because I was refusing to be their victim any longer. I spent the rest of the day gathering the final piece of my case. I wasn't just going to get my money, I was going to ensure justice. I went back to my hotel and made one more call, this time to a man named Arthur Vance. Mr. Vance was a former client of Connor's investors. I had found his name in a public filing from a lawsuit 2 years prior. He had been scammed in a nearly identical business venture. I had reached out to him via a secure email 2 days ago. He had, unsurprisingly, been very willing to talk. "Mr. Vance," I said, Caroline last name, "we spoke via email." "Yes, miss," his voice was gravelly, tired. "I remember. You said your brother was mixed up with them." "He is, and my parents are on the hook for it. They're trying to get me to pay the $50,000. "Don't you do it," he spat. "It's not $50,000. The moment you pay, it'll be $100,000. They'll find a fee, an interest payment. They don't let go, they bled me dry. I have no intention of paying them, Mr. Vance, but I do have a proposition. My family is meeting me tomorrow. I believe Connor's investors will be there. My brother will have no choice but to bring them, thinking he can intimidate me. I want you to be there too." There was a long silence. "What's in it for me?" "Vindication," I said, "and I'm a senior engineer at my company. My personal attorney is Sarah Jensen. I'm sure you've heard of her. If you come, and you state for the record what they did to you, my lawyer will file a class action suit on behalf of you and every other victim we can find. Pro bono. We'll use my family's case as the predicate. We will ruin them." Another pause. "They'll be there, the lenders themselves." "I'm counting on it," I said. "I'll be there," he said, a new hard edge in his voice. "Just tell me when and where." The final confrontation was set. That evening, I got a new text from my mother. "Connor called, the men are with him, they want to talk to you. They say if you just meet them, you can clear this all up. Please, Caroline, he's so scared. Tomorrow, a private room at the Old Country Club. 11 a.m. Please, this is the last chance." The trap was set. They thought they were bringing me to an intimidation session. They thought they could scare the rich daughter into paying. They were about to walk into a legal buzzsaw. I felt a tremor of fear, but it was overshadowed by a powerful, righteous resolve. This was it. This was the end of the line. For 10 years, they had haunted me. After tomorrow, it would be over. I replied with a single word. "Fine." The country club was a desperate attempt by my parents to project a power they didn't have. It was old, the carpets were faded, and it smelled like furniture polish and regret. They had booked a small, private dining room. I arrived at 10:45 a.m. I was not alone. Mr. Vance, a grim-faced man in his 60s, was with me. So was a court stenographer I had hired, who set up her equipment discreetly in the corner. I had told my parents I was bringing a financial advisor and a notary. They were already there. My mother, Helen, looked like she hadn't slept in a week. My father, Frank, was sweating through his golf shirt. Connor was there, sitting between 2 men I didn't recognize. One was stocky, with a shiny suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The other was tall, silent, and looked like he was carved from granite. These were the investors. "Caroline," my mother said, jumping up. "Thank God, this is Mr. Rossi." The man in the shiny suit, Rossi, stood and extended a hand. "Ms. Last name, a pleasure. It's so good we can finally sit down and sort out this unpleasantness." I ignored his hand. "Please sit." I sat at the head of the table. Mr. Vance sat to my right. The stenographer sat in the corner, her fingers poised. "I see you brought friends," Rossi said, his smile tightening. "This is a private family matter." "This is a business meeting, Mr. Rossi," I said. "This is my advisor, Mr. Vance, and this is Ms. Peters, who will be taking a formal record of our conversation, for legal clarity." Rossi's eyes narrowed. Frank and Helen looked confused. Connor just looked sick. "There's no need for that," Rossi said, waving a dismissive hand. "We're all friends here. Look, your brother made a bad deal. He's young, he's an artist." He said the word with contempt, and he got in over his head. "He owes my associates $50,000. We'd like to get it paid so we can all move on with our lives. Your parents said you were successful." "I am successful," I said, "and my success has taught me to spot a fraudulent deal when I see one, such as the one you offered my brother, and the one you offered Mr. Vance here 2 years ago." I nodded to Mr. Vance. Rossi's face froze. He looked at Mr. Vance, and for the first time, a flicker of panic appeared in his eyes. He recognized him. "Mr. Rossi," Vance said, his voice booming in the small room. "Remember me? Arthur Vance. Vance Auto Body, you and your partner there offered me a bridge loan. You bled me for $200,000 before I had to declare bankruptcy. You took my shop, my house. You took everything." "I don't know what you're talking about," Rossi said, pushing his chair back. "This is harassment." "What you're running isn't a venture capital fund, Mr. Rossi," I said, my voice sharp. "It's a predatory lending scheme. A loan-to-own scam, to be precise. You find desperate, foolish people." I glanced at Connor, who flinched. "You give them an investment, and then you use intimidation and extortion to seize all their assets and the assets of their families. Am I missing anything?" Rossi and his silent partner both stood up. "This meeting is over. We'll be in touch with Connor." "I don't think so," I said. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Ms. Peters, please note that Mr. Rossi is attempting to leave. Mr. Rossi, I should inform you that my lawyer has already filed a complaint with the state's attorney general, citing your lending practices. Mr. Vance is the primary witness. I am the secondary. And my brother," I turned to Connor, "is about to be your star witness." Connor looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "What? No, I'm not." "You have 2 choices, Connor," I said. "You can testify against them, in which case the AG's office will likely be very lenient regarding your own questionable business practices, or you can leave with them. But I assure you, they will be arrested before they reach the parking lot. I made a call to the local police department this morning about extortion threats being made at this location. I imagine they're already outside." Rossi's face went purple. He looked at his partner, then at Connor. My mother, Helen, finally found her voice. She stood up, her entire body shaking with a fury I had never seen before. It wasn't directed at me, it was directed at Connor. "You," she screamed, pointing at her son. "You did this, you brought these animals into our lives, you lied to us, you ruined us, all for what? Your vision? Your projects." "Mom, Connor stammered. "No," Frank roared, standing up beside her. He was an insurance adjuster. He knew fraud when he saw it, and he finally saw it in his own son. "She's right. All these years, all the money, that hit and run. It wasn't a parked car, was it? We just believed you." It was a revelation, hanging in the air. A decade-old lie, suddenly exposed by the current one. Connor's face crumpled. The arrogance, the charm, it all dissolved. He was just a weak, terrified man. It was a person. I hit a cyclist. I didn't stop. I'm so sorry. Helen let out a sound, a high, keening wail. It was the sound of a delusion shattering. She stumbled, and Frank caught her. The door to the room burst open. 2 uniformed police officers entered. "We got a call about a disturbance." Mr. Rossi held up his hands. "No disturbance, officer, just a misunderstanding." "That's him," Mr. Vance said, pointing. "That's the man who defrauded me. That's John Rossi." The officers looked at Rossi, then at me. "He and his associate are wanted for questioning in connection with an extortion complaint I filed this morning," I said calmly. "And my brother," I looked at Connor, who was now openly sobbing, head in his hands, is ready to give a full statement. The showdown was over. The police escorted a sputtering, threatening Rossi and his silent partner out of the room. Mr. Vance gave me a single, grim nod and followed them, ready to give his own statement. It was just the three of them and me. My parents looking utterly broken, my brother a collapsed ruin. My mother looked up at me, her eyes red and empty. What happens now? I looked at her and at my father. I felt no triumph, no joy, just a vast, cold emptiness, the end of a long, painful chapter. I walked over to the table and picked up the portfolio I had brought the day before, the loan agreement. I slid it in front of my father. Now, I said, you sign the paper, or I file the suit, your choice. My father, Frank, looked at the document. He looked at my mother, who was staring blankly at the wall. He looked at his son, who was muttering, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, over and over again. Then he picked up the pen. He signed his name. He pushed it to Helen. She signed it without reading it. The notary, Ms. Peters, quietly stamped and signed the document. She packed her equipment, handed me the original, and left the room. I was, officially, my parents' primary creditor. The lawsuit against Rossi will proceed, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. My lawyer will handle everything for Mr. Vance. The Attorney General's office will be in touch with you, Connor, about your testimony. And us? Frank asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. This payment. The first payment is due in 30 days, I said, sliding his copy across the table. You'll be paying me $473.68 every month for the next 30 years. It's a standard mortgage. But our house, Helen whispered. You should have thought of that when you stole from your daughter, I said, the words sharp but devoid of heat. You'll have to sell it, I assume, to pay your other debts and to downsize. That, or you'll have to get jobs. The reality of their situation finally settled on them. They were in their 60s, retired, and now in debt to the daughter they had bankrupted. Connor looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and desperation. Caroline, what about me, the hit and run? You won't tell them, will you? I looked at him, the golden boy, the thoroughbred. He was finally, truly terrified of a consequence. Testify against Rossi, cooperate fully, and maybe, just maybe, the new information about that old crime will be handled with leniency. That's the best I can do. I put my copy of the agreement in my briefcase. I turned to leave. Caroline, wait, my mother said. She stood up, her face desperate. Please, after all this, can't we just start over? You were so strong, you saved us. I stopped at the door and turned to look at her. Saved you? Helen, I didn't save you. I just bought your debt. I didn't do this for you. I didn't even do it for the money. I did it for the 19-year-old girl you left at a bus station. I did it to prove that my life mattered. But we're your family, she said, the last pathetic plea. No, I said. You are just people I used to know, and now you're clients I'll be billing. Goodbye. I walked out of the country club, into the bright sunshine. I got in my rental car and drove straight to the airport. I didn't look back. The aftermath was exactly as I had planned. Rossi and his partner were arrested. Faced with a class action suit and testimony from Connor, they took a plea deal that landed them in prison. Connor, for his cooperation, received probation for his involvement in the scam. The old hit-and-run case was reopened, but given the time that had passed and his cooperation, he was sentenced to community service and a permanent loss of his license. My parents sold their house. They had to. They moved into a small, sad retirement condo, and every month, like clockwork, a check for $473.68 appeared in my bank account. It wasn't about the money, it was the consequence. It was the reminder, every 30 days, that I had won. I never spoke to them again. I didn't need to. The contract said everything that needed to be said. My life went on. I was promoted. I started my own consulting firm. I found peace, not in forgiveness, but in justice. I had closed the ledger. The debt was being paid, and I finally was free.